So about a week ago now, Russ and I attended Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party, which is a hard-ticketed event that takes place at Magic Kingdom here in the Walt Disney World Resort. We actually took you guys along with us, so if you want to check that out, I'll have a link in the description. It's a pretty long one, but we had a lot of fun making it and we think you'll enjoy it. Anyway, during our visit, we had a lot of things that we were keeping in mind because you guys had asked us a number of questions and we wanted to make sure that we covered everything, but also got all the information that we think you guys might want and need to know. And there was a lot. There were a lot of thoughts that were bopping around our brain throughout the evening. So many, in fact, that we couldn't communicate them to you while we were there at the event. I said we're going to check in with you guys later, and today is that day. And let me tell you, we made notes, and there are a lot of them. So get yourself comfortable, grab a cold drink, and let's go over some of these things, because if you're going to be attending Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party this year, or even Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party later in the year, maybe you're considering doing this in the future, I think there are some things in all of these sticky notes that you're going to want to know. So before we dig in, and we are going to dig into absolutely everything today, I think it's important to note right at the start that the key to success, if you want to attend this event, is going to be good planning and a good mindset. And like I said, we're going to go over everything. So you're going to have all the tools in order to get you on the right track to doing that. But we can't jump into today's discussion with unreasonable expectations. We have to set a solid foundation so that we can build on top of that. And that foundation, in my opinion, is made up of two things. Number one, understanding that you're not going to be able to do everything. And number two, understanding and having a firm grasp on the fact that things will go wrong. They're not necessarily going to go according to plan. This is basically the same song and dance that we have every time we talk about any type of planning, whether it's planning a Disney vacation or traveling anywhere else. But we all need a little reminder now and again, so consider this that. Now, with that out of the way, another thing I want to add onto the foundation of our discussion are some basic realities about Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. And we're going to touch a little bit more on these throughout our discussion today. But again, right out the gate, I want to get us all on the same page. First, it's crowded. Probably more crowded than some of you may be expecting, certainly more crowded than some of the parties in the past have been. Now again, crowds ebb and flow, not only year to year, but evening to evening. So this might not be everyone's experience, but it was ours. Of course, with these crowds, it's important to realize that you will be waiting in lines. This is not going to be like some other after-hours events, either here at Disney or at other theme parks in the Central Florida area where everything's a walk-on. And finally, nothing is guaranteed. We're going to talk about a lot today. We're going to go over everything that's listed here in this map, all of the offerings that are available during Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. But it is so important to understand that just because something is listed as an offering doesn't mean it's going to be available to you. Again, we're going to get more into that as we go. All right, so now that we've built the foundation so we can build this discussion on something solid, let's talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of the event. So Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party is a hard-ticketed event, which is a fancy way of saying that you need a special ticket in order to attend. And that ticket is, of course, separate from your daytime park admission. Don't think that you can buy a ticket for Magic Kingdom on a party day and attend this party. Unfortunately, you'll have to buy a ticket for Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party separately. The event kicks off in August and runs all the way through Halloween, so you have plenty of opportunities to attend. And if you want to attend, that ticket, it's going to cost you anywhere from $130 to nearly $300. Of course, don't forget we have to talk about taxes here. There are some discounts for annual pass holders and Disney Vacation Club members, but it's just about $10 off, which, you know, is something, but it's not a huge discount. The event runs from 7 p.m. until midnight, but you can get into Magic Kingdom with your Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party ticket starting at 4. Now, included in your Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party ticket, outside of admission to Magic Kingdom starting at 4 p.m. and running through midnight, you'll also find exclusive treats available for purchase at various locations throughout the park. Live entertainment, meet and greets with some characters that you probably won't find at Magic Kingdom during normal park hours. Honestly, you probably won't find them anywhere outside of a special event. There are magic shots and dance parties. There are also some attraction overlays or enhancements. But one thing that you won't find in any of the promotional materials for Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party, at least I haven't been able to find it myself, is the promise of lower wait times. Now, I mention this because this was one of the questions that came in from one of you guys, and it was one of the things that we were keeping our eye out for while we were at the party. While there is some fine print on the Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party page that says there are a limited number of tickets available available. The only place I've been able to find anything about lower wait times has been from sources that aren't Disney. So for example, blogs or YouTube videos, short form content. And look, I want to have a more in-depth discussion about this. Today's not that day though, because we have so much else to talk about, but I do think it's worth mentioning, just because it is relevant to today's discussion, that there are people out there, myself included from time to time, that will repeat something, for example, saying that this is your opportunity to experience lower wait times, and that might not necessarily be consistent with the way that these events are being advertised by the people putting them on, like by Disney. And so you always have to be careful. You always have to understand that, sometimes people get things wrong. Again, I'm not exempt from this. I try to make corrections when I can, but another example of this that I've seen kind of popping up, especially on short form content, are people saying that the Haunted Mansion is one of the attractions that is enhanced for this event. That is not consistent with what's in here, in the Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party map. Doesn't have it listed as one of the offerings. So, always take everything with a grain of salt. But okay, speaking of what's available in the map, let's go over what's offered as part of Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party according to Disney. And again, remember, all of this stuff is going to kick off at 7 p.m. when the party starts, even though you can get into Magic Kingdom starting at 4. So right off the bat, it mentions that there are Halloween twists on attractions. This includes Space Mountain, Mad Tea Party, and Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor. Also new for this year, 2025 that is, you can meet Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse together at Town Square Theater on Main Street, USA. This is where you can normally meet Mickey Mouse, but of course, it's pretty rare to get Mickey and Minnie together. This is also where you can meet Jack and Sally. Of course, you can go trick-or-treating throughout the park. You can also find the trick-or-treat locations here in the map, and I recommend that you do that, especially if trick-or-treating is something that you really want to take advantage of during this party. I'll tell you right now, we missed a few spots, and I'm a little disappointed, okay? I am. I think that some of these spots probably would have given out a good amount of candy, because I'd imagine not a whole lot of people were back there, but that's neither here nor there. A discussion for another day, I suppose. Now, of course, if you can't have M&M's, Snickers, Skittles, or whatever the case may be, you can get allergy-friendly treats here as well. There is a special process for that, but it's pretty straightforward. The long and short of this process is, rather than getting a standard trick-or-treat bag, you'll get an allergy-friendly one that is teal. And then at the trick-or-treat locations, you're going to get a token as opposed to candy, and you can go to one of 2 locations. They are listed on the map, and you can turn those tokens in for allergy-friendly treats. But let's talk a little bit about entertainment, because I really feel like this is where Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party shines. Of course, Mickey's Boo to You Halloween Parade happens at 8:15 p.m. and 11:15 p.m. It kicks off in Frontierland, and it follows a standard parade route. The Hocus Pocus Villain Spectacular is another really great show, and it happens at various times throughout the evening, but it does change depending on when you're attending the event. So as you can see on your screen, events from August 15th through September 26th, it happens at 9:05 p.m., 10:35 p.m., and then at midnight, and then events happening from September 28th through October 31st, it's at 7:35 p.m., 9:05 p.m., 10:35 p.m., and then again at midnight. As a little bit of a side note before we go on, and yes, we're going to touch more on this here in a bit, but I just want to toss this out there right now. You're going to want to pay close attention to the schedule. Not only for shows like this, but also for when different restaurants are closing, because not every restaurant is open all night long. I've got some tips and tricks on that. We'll talk a little bit more about them here in a bit, but just make note that you're going to have to do some planning. I know, that's not really saying anything that you guys don't already know. I mean, you're here already, right? But anyway, moving on. The Cadaver Dan's Barbershop Quartet happens at Frontierland intermittently from 7 p.m. to 10:55 p.m. Rusty Cutlass, which is a pirate band, happens in Adventureland intermittently between 7:15 p.m. and 11:50 p.m. The Disney Junior Jam is a dance party that takes place at Cosmic Ray's Starlight Cafe. There's the Zombeats Bash dance party, which happens in that outdoor stage in Tomorrowland, not far from the Carousel of Progress. There's Halloween Fun that happens at Storybook Circus, which simply says entertainment that lights up the night with surprise appearances by Pluto. And then there's the fireworks show, Disney's Not So Spooky Spectacular, which happens at 10 p.m. So there is a lot going on and a lot to keep track of, which brings us to our next point, our next topic of discussion, which is planning. Now look, I know you've heard me say this a million times before, especially if you've been hanging out with me for a while. Planning is important, but I'm not suggesting that you make like a minute-by-minute itinerary. that's unnecessary. But there's no getting around the fact that you can't just go with the flow and make the most out of your evening. Unless, of course, you're willing to miss out on certain things that might have been important to you. So it's a balance, as is everything, right? So what does making a plan look like, and how do we do this in a way that isn't going to have you and your family going completely insane before you arrive? Great question, and I'm happy to walk you through this. So this all starts before you arrive, which is presumably what the situation is right now. So great job. You're already off to a fantastic start. I want you to take some time and think about what's most important to you. What is it that you want to get out of visiting Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party? And no, it can't be getting your money's worth. I'm sorry, but that's not what we're talking about here. What I'm talking about is, do you want to attend all the shows? Do you want to see all of the live entertainment? Do you want to meet all of the characters? Or do you want to try all of the party exclusive food? And on top of that, what is the stuff that you definitely don't want to miss versus the stuff that it's no big deal if you can't get to it? Figuring this out ahead of your visit is really important, not only for planning, but also for your mindset. Another thing that is so very important that I feel the need to repeat it again, I know I've said it already a few times today, but you're just not going to be able to do everything, and you really need to wrap your head around that. In some cases, it's going to be because you just don't have enough time because of other things that you were doing. You know, your kids got caught up at a dance party. Other times, your timing is just not going to be right because, again, some of these offerings are available intermittently. So there is no real schedule. It's kind of a hit or miss situation. So keep that in mind while you're doing your research, which might include watching videos, reading blogs, scrolling social media. You know, pull that list together, make sure that the high priority thing is at the top. Be reasonable with the number of high priority things that you put on that list as well, and understand that, hey, you might be able to do this thing, but you might not. I also think that it's a good idea to have some low-hanging fruit, some easy wins, stuff that you know you can do and you can have fun doing. For us, during our Halloween party, it was trick-or-treating. Also, when it comes to building the plan and taking it with you, I know some people like to have a notebook or whatever. I did this by making a list on my phone. It was easy. I made a checklist so that I could actually poke and check off every item. It also helped me stay focused on the things that we really wanted to do. I could put as much detail as I wanted to right there in that list. For example, times that things were available. I also used my phone to set reminders. So I know I wanted to see a particular show and I set a reminder 30 minutes in advance and then another reminder 10 minutes in advance, just so that I wouldn't miss it. And that, I know it might sound a little bit counterintuitive because I used my phone. It made sure that I didn't have to be stuck on my phone all night. So I did find that very helpful. But all right, now that the planning's all out of the way, you've got all your priorities set, you're here at Walt Disney World, it's party day, what are some of the things that I think you need to know? Now, as I mentioned earlier, the party starts at 7 p.m., but you can get into Magic Kingdom starting at 4, which, quite frankly, I think is a good way to go. Now, of course, there are some pros and cons to this. If you don't have daytime admission to Magic Kingdom, you only have your party ticket, you are going to be waiting in line outside the park in order to get in, which is pretty standard stuff, right? But depending on when you're visiting and the conditions on that particular day, it can be really hot. That's not necessarily the way you want to start your day, you know? But if you don't mind that, or if it's a rather cool or overcast day, I think it's worth getting there early so that you can get into the park a little bit early and maybe do some things that you might not have had the opportunity to do because, let's say, this is your only time to visit Magic Kingdom during your visit. On the other hand, maybe you don't want to go that route. That's fine too. That's a good option. Maybe you want to wait a little bit. I do think that you should try and be inside the park before 6 p.m. We're going to talk a little bit more about why here in a bit, but let's talk about those of you who might have daytime admission to Magic Kingdom. If you have the ability to be in the park prior to 4 p.m., I think that's a good route to go. Even if you arrive just before 4, there isn't really a line to get in, so you can walk right through and make your way to a wristband distribution station. There are 2 located in Magic Kingdom. I will say wristband distribution starts at 4 p.m., and I do think that it's a good idea to make your way into the area that it's going to happen prior to that. I would say probably about 20 minutes prior to that, because we arrived just before 4 and there was a crazy line. This is something unlike I've ever experienced before when picking up my wristband. I've always just waltzed up at 4 o'clock, had no wait, and was good to go. So I'm not exactly sure why it was different on this particular day. This also wasn't just something that happened in Tomorrowland. We did get a chance to meet up with one of you guys while we were at the party, and you said in Adventureland it was a similar situation. Oh, as a little side note, I did just check one of my sticky notes, and I forgot to mention this a second ago. We also found that security took a lot longer on this particular day than it has ever taken us in the past. Now, of course, they're doing that to make sure that everyone stays safe, but it took us about 10 minutes to go through security, and I'm not talking about the line, I'm talking about that was how long it took them to check our individual bags. And I will say we went through with the same stuff that we always go through, and for whatever reason today, it was a problem. Now, of course, we're all for extra precautions. I'm not mentioning this because it annoyed me in any way. I'm mentioning it so that you can prepare accordingly. Okay, so back to you picked up your wristband. It's just after 4 o'clock. This is a perfect opportunity to take a good look at the map. Just kind of settle yourself in, compare your plan to what the map reflects. Of course, you want to make sure that nothing has changed, so taking a second to give it an extra glance is always a good plan. This is also a great time to jump on a few attractions because we did see wait times dip around this time. Since the park closes to day guests at 6 and the party starts at 7, people start to trickle out, and the people who are coming in for the party, I think, are under the impression that there are going to be less wait times once the party starts. That's not necessarily the case, so use this time to your advantage. And speaking of using this time to your advantage, let's talk a little bit about food. So like I said earlier, there are some Halloween exclusives, some Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party exclusives that you can purchase during the event. And for most people, myself included, I've always assumed that that meant once the event started, but that's not necessarily the case. One thing that we learned during our recent trip to Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party is that they actually do start serving these party exclusives once the park closes for the day. Now for us, we found this to be around 6:15, so 6:15. And while mobile order wasn't available until 7 p.m., we were able to order some of these party exclusives prior to that. Now when it comes to food, as I mentioned, you can order at the counter. You can also use mobile order, which is very convenient. But it's important to note that not every location is going to be open through the duration of the evening or throughout the entire party. Unfortunately, times aren't listed here on the maps. You're going to need your My Disney Experience app for that. I recommend taking a look at the times ahead of time, put that in your plan, add it to your checklist, and maybe even set an alarm if there's some place that you really want to grab something from, but they aren't open through the entire evening. That way you don't miss out on it. That's what I did, and like I said, it worked like a charm. Speaking of things being available before the party actually kicks off, we also found that merchandise for the party exclusive merch, was available earlier as well. Now you can find this merch not only at the Emporium, which tends to be really crazy, but also over at Star Traders, which is where we did our shopping. We bought everything that was on our list prior to the party just so that it was out of the way. This worked well for us this year, and it's also worked well for us in the past. Not only is it out of the way, but we don't have to worry about things being sold out. So I highly recommend going this route, buying things earlier in the evening so that you don't have to think about it. If you don't want to carry it around all day, put it in a locker. I know it's an extra expense, but quite frankly, I think it's worth it. But okay, I think that basically covers all of the things that you need to know, all of the nuts and bolts. Now let's wrap things up with some of the review-like elements of Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. And I know we've been talking for a while, so I'll do my best, okay? But I just want you to have all the info. So I think for this event, we started off with some basic realities, and I want to wrap up with some realities as well. Just kind of hit some things home and make sure that you understand what you're getting yourself into if you're going to be attending this party or if you're thinking about attending one in the future. First and foremost, and again, this is one of those things that you guys asked us about, I think it's important to realize that it's not less crowded in the way that I think some of you might expect it to be. While there were times throughout the evening that wait times were definitely lower than they would be on a normal crazy Disney day, it did feel a lot more like a normal Disney day than it did like an exclusive low capacity party. And quite frankly, if your goal for visiting Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party is to experience lower wait times, you're just going to do that for your Magic Kingdom day as opposed to attending on a normal day, I'm not necessarily sure that this is the route I would consider going. I mentioned this while we were at the party, but it's worth saying again. I don't think that this is an alternative to a day at Magic Kingdom. Of course, not everything's going to be available because it is a party, so some things are closed or modified. But if you're thinking that you're going to do the party and it's going to be all walk-ons, that is not a reasonable expectation for this evening, because that's not what you're getting. Another piece of guidance that I have heard all the time, I've even given it myself, is that if you stay later, you're going to experience less crowds, especially for things like the parade. That was not our experience during this visit. Things were pretty consistently crowded all night long, though there were some ebbs and flows, especially with the wait times. But it definitely wasn't like all the parents brought their kids home after the first parade or after the fireworks. No, that was definitely not the case, which I think kind of speaks to a trend or a shift in trends that we've been seeing when it comes to travel in general. This is a bigger discussion for another day, but the way that people are parenting their children, or the way that parents are going about parenting their kids, I don't even know if that's the right way to say it, but parents aren't doing the standard things that parents of yesteryear used to do, which, no judgment, you do you, but parents are much more likely to pull their kids out of school to travel during off times. This isn't something that's consistent with what we've seen in the past, and that's kind of reflected in the way that travel trends go, and like how we see crowded times of the year. That also applies in this case as well. In other words, things are shifting, things are changing. So what might have been like this surefire way to avoid crowds in the past isn't necessarily that any longer. So just worth taking into consideration. Another thing that made this event a little tricky was the lack of structure. Like there wasn't a particular schedule for this, that, or the other. There were also some times throughout the evening where the entrance of a treat trail would change. So you were looking for a particular like blow up pylon thing, but you wouldn't enter that way. You would enter another way, and there wasn't really any guidance. This lack of structure made things a little bit challenging, frustrating in some cases, not from my perspective, but from the perspective of other guests that were around us and communicating that rather loudly. But it also ultimately comes down to the fact that you will be missing things if you're attending this event. There's just no way that you can see it all because you have no idea when it's happening. A great example of this is what was going on over in Storybook Circus. And of course, we mentioned in our video, we weren't able to see the hitchhiking ghosts kind of out in the wild. Now, if you watched our video, you came along with us, you didn't see absolutely everything, right? Of course not. I mean, it was a long night. We couldn't have captured every second of it if we tried, as it was. We had almost 3 hours worth of footage, and we kind of whittled that down to the 55 minutes that made up that video. But anyway, I mentioned that because we made multiple passes. We didn't just kind of do one lap of the park and call it good. We tried to see some of these things, and we just couldn't. And maybe it was because our timing was off. Maybe they weren't scheduled to perform on a particular night or perform as frequently on this particular night as opposed to other nights. So, who knows? But I do think that it's worth noting again that you're just not going to be able to see everything. Now, when it comes to the best way to enjoy this event, at least in my opinion, I think the best way to go is to focus on party exclusives because, of course, you can experience other park offerings during the day. So if you really want to experience Magic Kingdom for Magic Kingdom's sake, we recommend getting a park ticket outside of the party. Also, as I said earlier, prioritizing what's most important to you. And finally, don't forget to have fun. I know that we all want to get our money's worth when we attend these things, but it's easy to forget that we're there to enjoy our families and to have fun. And the best way to do this, in my opinion, is to have some easy wins scheduled in. For us, as you guys saw in our video, it was trick-or-treating. We made a game out of it. We tried to see who could get the most candy. And because we did that, it gave us small wins that honestly became the highlight of our evening and ultimately made the misses, and there were a few, easier to swallow. This is a great thing to learn how to do. Just quite frankly, whether we're talking about traveling or daily life. I know a lot of us, we aim high. We want everything to be as perfect as it can be, but I think it's easy to forget that sometimes the best and most memorable moments are the ones that go unplanned. And, for us, for this event, it was trick-or-treating. So that was the best part of our evening, and we had a blast. But finally, the question that's on everyone's mind, I promise this is the last thing we're covering today, is it worth it? Is it worth visiting Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party? Now, let me start off by saying that we had a fantastic time. We enjoyed ourselves. There's really no way around it. And we did pay about $135 per person. That's with a $10 discount as Disney Vacation Club members. At this price point, sure. I think it was worth it. I mean, it was ultimately 8 hours of park admission, with candy, exclusive treats, live entertainment. I paid a lot more for a lot less. But when we start talking about $200 plus, I have a harder time justifying this. For me, at that price point, especially as we get closer to Halloween, I just think that it's much too crowded. I think it's too complex when it comes to the intermittent times that some of these offerings are happening, and just the hit or miss approach I'm just not really down with that for the price point. I think that there should be more opportunities for you to do more, and I just didn't feel like that was the case during our visit. And this could also include things like food only being available during a limited time, you know, like things closing before the end of the party. I also think that for the price point, and I know some of you are going to roll your eyes at me, but still, I think there should be no instance where you're only getting like 2 pieces of candy from a trick-or-treat stop. See, I told you were going to roll your eyes. But let's be real here. If you started trick-or-treating at a place that gave you 2 pieces of candy, I feel like that might sour your experience. Maybe a little. But anyway, I think that's all there is to say about Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. Oh my goodness, what a discussion this has been. I hope that you guys find this helpful. Of course, if you have anything that you'd like to add, pop it in the comments down below. But for now, I'm off. Have a spooky season. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.